Elon's working on, little EMP guns or some shit.
Probably.
You know, something, some sort of.
At least he probably has an idea.
I mean, like
of what he wants to do to counteract it. If necessary.
Know, he's working on shielding technology, force fields, if you will, things that could make long-term space life much easier. Well, yeah, I mean, he's got to have deep R&D.
There was an article I saw floating around that had a picture of what they thought they could do to give Mars an atmosphere, and one of the things that they were talking about doing was parking like a satellite or some kind of body that generates a magnetic field in between the sun and Mars. So it would sit at like, this, I guess, a Lagrange point, one of the Mars Lagrange points, where it could just sit in between it and the sun and be locked in that particular position, right? I don't know. It's probably going to need propulsion of some sort to stay where it needs to stay, right?
Orbital mechanics insist that if you're 5 feet closer to the sun, you're going to move slightly faster than that object.
Yeah.
But
I don't know.
It makes sense to try to figure out some sort of radiation shield.
Absolutely. Well, that's what the theory is, right? That Mars it doesn't have an atmosphere anymore because of the lack of a magnetic field. That it just got burned off.
Yeah. Well, and there's no active core. I mean, like,
do we know that?
We don't know, I guess.
Well, not that we can see, right? I mean, we don't have any. There's no evidence to suggest that there's any kind of volcanic activity on Mars, is there?
Imagine we've been able to even primitively at least.
Yeah, I'm sure we would know, right?
Because fields, right? So.
Yeah, because we know that. That one of the other planets, and I think it's I want to say it's one of Jupiter's moons, we know is definitely volcanic, right? It definitely spews stuff out into the sky.
Yeah, beautiful photos too.
Right. And so I would
NASA.
think that if Mars was volcanically active, we would definitely know about it. Like you and I would know about it, knowing, like, being who we are, to look into shit like that, right?
I like the idea of starting with the moon. I mean, it's cool to think about. I think SpaceX wanted to be doing that by 2030, having somebody on the moon to some sustainable form. No, that was.
So what was the shoot? What were they shooting for with Mars? Was it 2060?
No, it was 2030. I think was their
initial
right.
Their initial target that just got blown out of the water.
Best I can tell as of now, it's to be determined. But
Mars,
they're going to focus on the moon.
They're going to focus on the moon, and then from there, whatever.
But I mean, come on, it makes a little sense.
Well, it does, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. It's a closer destination. It's easier to get there. It's just as good of a spot to pick. I mean, I guess the only concern, and I think that based on what he said in the past, where his kind of idea is that we're a multiplanetary species, so that we don't all get killed by the same rock, right?
Right.
And I think that the moon gives us that, but then the Mars gives us even more safety, because I mean, what are the chances that the Earth and the moon's fate could be intertwined in some kind of event, right?
Sure.
Like, who knows, right?
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, here's a good book for you. Neil Stephenson, right, wrote a book called Seven Eves, and it's a lot of orbital. The way I look at Neil Stephenson is he writes books about. He'll write a book about a scientific topic and teach you about it in a really freaking fascinating way.
That's cool.
I don't really remember what the topic was of Zodiac. It was like environmentalism or something like that. And I'm probably horribly butchering that. But I do remember the Diamond Age, and the Diamond Age was a very inspiring book to me because it really kind of opened my mind to the idea of what nanotechnology could actually achieve, and the great potential of that particular science, right? So he teaches you about something. Like, he wrote a book called Cryptonomicon. It was about code breaking or cryptology. I haven't read that one yet. But this one was about orbital mechanics, and it was about, not to spoil it for you, but, you know, they talk a lot about what could possibly happen in a cataclysm, you know, in a cataclysmic event.
Right.
And it's a very, very interesting book. My only criticism of it, and I love Neil Stephenson, but my only criticism of it is that the end gets a little weird. Like, he gets a little bit like, I don't know. But that's
I'll
just
have to check it out. Neil
It's
Stephenson.
a good book. It's a good book. For the ending, it makes sense, but it's a little wonky.
I've got to be less clumsy than this.
No worries, man. We just probably need to clear the table of anything that makes loud clankety noises, right?
So we talked at the end last week at the end outside, and we talked about potentially starting every episode with an introduction. You know,
Right,
what do
and
you
picking
think?
a topic.
Yeah,
I think it's a good idea.
You know,
And start out and just see where it kind of wanders from there.
Yeah, especially since I imagine, you know, we're gonna have a humble audience number.
Yeah.
So you know, hopefully the idea would be pick up new users, and you know, it would be a cool way to just introduce ourselves to new users or viewers.
So one of my favorite topics, and I saw kind of I was excited at first when I saw the article because I was hoping that it would be like it would be a decent article for us to talk about it, but it was one of those clickbait bullshit, just kind of like, they say this and scientists say random fact, and it's like the article's like a paragraph, and it's just pointless, right? But it's something that's been on my mind a lot. And then, you know, what the article said was basically that if you are alive, if you live 30 more years,
you'll probably live 1,000.
You'll live 1,000, right? You saw it. It's probably plastered. It's clickbaited all over Facebook, right?
Yeah. Well, my son told me about it.
Oh, did he?
Which kind of makes
that's
sense.
Funny.
He told me about it yesterday.
Did he?
I thought of you immediately.
Did you really?
You know.
What did he have to say about it? I'm curious to see what his thoughts were.
Yeah, I'll tell you that my boys are, you know, it's so funny because they're kind of like, yeah, we figured. You know, they weren't.
They really hadn't crossed their mind that they were going to die anyway.
I just don't think, you know, for them, it was almost expected, you know.
Right.
So for me, I heard it, and I'm like, you know, I got 30 years in me.
Yeah, right? I'm kind of the same way, right?
You know, so it's just a matter, I think, by the time we're 30 years older than we are now, it's like, all right, what are the options for reversal of
Right, exactly. See, that's
because we're going to be old as fuck.
We are. We're going to be pretty fucking old.
You know?
We are going to be, you know, and when it came up and I was looking at it and I talked to my wife about it, and I was like, what if we're the last ones?
That's what I mean. What if
like,
we're
if we're the first generation that doesn't really have to die, right? Yeah. And I gotta be honest, I have always felt like I was gonna make it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it sounds ridiculous, and I would never. It's not something I would ever really want to admit if it really wasn't something that, like, I don't like talking about. I don't like admitting it, but I really did believe ever since I was a kid, like, I'm just probably not going to get old and die. Like, I just don't think I just never thought that was the way I was going to go out. And what sucks is, right? So now I'm an old dude and shit's starting to break, right? Because I don't take care of myself as nearly as well as I should. And so shit's starting to break. My shoulder fucking hurts and my elbows fucking hurt and my toe feels like it dips in acid every once in a while. And I'm starting to like feel that burn. And I'm like, look, motherfuckers, you guys better fucking hurry up, right?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, one, technology will advance, I think, at a pace that it becomes possible. You know, we would be, my worry is the technology's there, but it's so primitive, you know.
Oh yeah, we're like
you're looking for
this is voodoo right now.
Healthy subject.
Yeah.
To try. Yeah. You know, that's the stage I'm probably gonna die.
No, we're shaking sticks at the sun right now, man. Is what we're doing. We're like, hoping this works.
Because at that point, you're looking for, you know, a 26-year-old male, a 26-year-old female,
right,
in great health.
Yeah, no, it's not gonna happen.
Let's try this. And then I'll be able to see that news report, how that went, and then I'm gonna kick it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You'll realize you got close as fuck.
Right?
You know,
you're laying in a hospital bed, you know, and they're about to turn the machine off, and you're like, well, fuck. Yeah.
Nah, you know, I don't know. I don't even know how I feel about it. To be honest,
I am cautiously optimistic. I'm really hopeful. I don't want to die, obviously. Not only do I not want to die, I really want to live as long as I can possibly fucking live. There is so much shit to see. Like, you just never would be able to see all of it.
Well, let me tell you what I think about the big difference between artists and authors, because we've had this conversation before.
Yeah, we have.
You know, as an artist, to some degree, most of my life, I've known a long time. I don't even become important until I die.
Really?
So for me, and
that's
this
true.
This
like,
has
right?
been decades of this that reading about all of these great artists that never saw fame or fortune.
Right, never saw
work.
Anything, right?
You know, that we still are talking about 500 years later.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
And they would have never, I mean, they would have laughed more than likely had you told them their fate, you know, and how they would be remembered. You know?
Right.
I mean, this is, so for me as an artist, I don't know that I have that fear of death. I almost just want, you know, my legacy to be left behind, and maybe I stand a chance of being remembered after that point. Like, for me, that's what's been in my head for decades.
And that makes sense, and I understand where you're coming from. But I think that that's the paradigm because we've never had a choice before. Do you know what I mean? Like,
sure.
I mean, Jackson Pollock was famous in his lifetime, right?
Oh yeah. Well, yeah.
Right.
Certainly.
Andy Warhol was famous in his lifetime.
You're more modern, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
and as they
Dolly
get older,
knew he was cool, man. I mean,
exactly,
don't get me
right?
wrong.
And as we've matured as a culture, we've started to appreciate art and appreciate the artist along with the art much sooner than I think we did before, because I think that as we've progressed as a culture or as human beings, have progressed, we've kind of started to take notice of more and have been able to communicate. Like, the lines of communication back, I mean, think about the Renaissance, right?
Sure.
Those guys, nobody knew who the fuck those guys were. because those paintings were hanging in some duke's palace, and only 26 people got to see it.
Maybe they were hanging in the Duke's palace. Maybe they were just in a little
cubbyhole somewhere. Right,
where
exactly.
the rest of your paintings were. And
right.
You're right. I mean, it's not like they could post a picture of their newest painting and, hope to get a couple likes on it.
Right.
So,
there you go. But see, and that's the thing, though. And I think that, I think that's what's going to be so great about our lives once we as humans get our shit together, because either we will or we won't, right? So I choose to believe that my future is going to be the future where humanity eventually gets its shit together, right? And that's what my hope is, because if we don't, it's not going to matter anyway. We're all going to be fucking dust.
Yeah, I think we all hope that. Probably for different reasons, but I think we all hope everybody gets their shit together. I mean, that's but I'm not. Well, not everybody, but
some men. When they say that some men just want to watch the world burn, right?
Yeah, that's it. But for me, I know that easily I've got 30 years ahead of me of like really cool like VR video games and shit that I can do when I'm like 80.
Right.
I'm excited for what's coming. I fear that as I get older, I'm still gonna have that same excitement for advancement and progression on that. It's gonna be fun to watch. But when I say it, if you hear the way I say it, it's gonna be fun to watch.
Yeah.
I don't consider, it's like I'm still not to where I'm considering myself. It's almost like,
it's hard to imagine. It's hard to believe that we might end up in that place.
Yeah, that's it.
It is, because
when you think about prolonged life in general, I mean, even if they figure out a way to get people to 180 years old, I mean, that's a major breakthrough at this point, right? That kind of stuff is cool. But I start to think like I've wanted to be so much more than an artist my life, but when I sit down and crunch math in my head about, all right, I may get this many years, at what point do I buckle down and just try to get better at what I'm doing versus changing fields versus if we're living to 200,
that dynamic shifts.
I'm 150 years old and I'm like, yeah, I was an artist once, back when I was 30, you know what I mean? 36, whatever. If that's the case, man, 8 years of college doesn't sound like too big of a deal. You know what I mean? So I'm going to go enroll myself. I'm going to go do something else.
Yeah.
And, that is cool. I like that. I like that thought. I love what I do, but,
Yeah.
That'd be, 150 years of what I do. Fuck that.
Right.
That'd be
and
boring
that's the
as
thing.
shit.
No, absolutely. It'd be completely boring.
Is this, what's this podcast rated?
Oh. Man, we're way past that point. We're way past that point.
But I think that's cool. I mean, it's another way of saying I have dreams I haven't achieved or even came close to. And that would be a ray of hope.
Right. And that's why and that is really kind of the way I feel about it, right? It's that you realize all of a sudden that you don't have to be that thing you don't want to be, right? The dude that sits in the cubicle 8 hours a day and looks at fucking reports or whatever, right? Whatever it is nowadays, codes, or looks at, codes web pages, or just stares at the screen. Yeah. And I mean, I think it's fascinating that it's all kind of converging all at once, right? So you have artificial intelligence, and you have quantum computing, and you have longevity, and you have space travel, all kind of converging at once. And when you kind of look at all of those and and take them to their ultimate conclusion and kind of realize that it's going to have a cascade effect. We're really close on AI. We're pretty close. I wouldn't say really close. We're close.
Yeah, we've got robots walking.
We've
in
got
the fountains,
stuff, right? Yeah, we've got
You know
artificial intelligence that's they're playing games and beating humans. Okay, so that's not a bad place to be, right? It's a pretty good place. It's not, HAL or anything like that, but it's not bad. So then we have quantum computing, right? And I think I read just recently they simulated a 51 qubit quantum computer. I don't know how you simulate a quantum computer and have any success at that, but I will take their word for it.
They must have learned enough about it, though. Huh?
But it's coming, and they're making advances, and it's really, at this point, it's only a matter of time. Now, whether that matter of time is 5 or 10 or whatever, I'm not even going to speculate because I don't know well enough to be able to say anything about that. But it's not going to be that long. I think a lifetime, And so when you have
for AI
or quantum computing or AI,
yeah.
I don't even think it's going to be that long, man. Honestly, I'm a very optimistic person. I'd say in the next decade we're going to see a quantum computer.
I'm thinking 5 years.
For a quantum computer?
I'm thinking 5 years because MIT students and a couple professors, I mean, just MIT in general, they really, this last month made strides in, I guess I didn't realize, our microchips we're really starting to slow down and being able to make those better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we're still in this point where, as I was reading, you got to have one chip for storage. You have to have one chip with readable data.
Mm-hmm.
You have to, so, I guess, never really thought of it. This is pretty primitive stuff compared to where we're going to be in 10 years. But MIT just made strides in making these, this reinventing the chip. It will be next gen, and it'll be on such a microscopic level of data, readable data transfer, storage, all in
like tiny little itty bitty specs,
right? And this was pretty recent development. Right. They've been working on, I think, 15 years or something, but this stuff, I think, all it takes is for that to just get in the hands of really smart people,
right?
And then we're leaps and bounds, because I think last year quantum computing was a pipe dream. I mean, we're running out of ways to make these microchips better.
Yeah,
we know right now there's no way that we can get that kind of muscle with our current technology. Mm-hmm. So I think this was a pretty major breakthrough, and feeling bad I can't quote more about it, but it was a really neat article. So I think that right there,
right,
is huge. And the recent article about I'm gonna say Harvard. You might have caught this one. This was a popular story. They modified DNA.
Oh yeah,
to have the horse running, right?
Right.
Yeah,
they made like a stereograph out of DNA.
Right. And that's all. It was cool. I mean, I was like, man, okay, that's cool. But then when you hear sort of where that technology is leading, I mean, this was just trying to see if anything works, and that was really, really cool. I mean, you read in that article, you're like, man, imagine what getting a horse galloping back from that data was like. But, really what they're going for is being able to fit massive amounts
here's the question,
of
right?
stuff into something you can't even see with the naked eye.
Right. So here's the question, right? So if they figured out how to put DNA or put data into DNA, I wonder if our DNA has anything in it. I wonder if there's any kind of pattern, or I wonder if anybody's ever. I imagine they would look, or some crazy person probably thinks that all kinds of shit's written in our DNA.
I've heard of this, that we could have even had an important message inlaid,
right.
That we would have to
creator.
We would have to be at such a technological level to read it that we then at that point would be able to handle it. Right? I mean, that's really what it is.
Right? Can we handle the message?
They're not going to be able to handle this until they're able to read it anyway. So
and that's an interesting thought, right? So, I've always thought about that, right? So, when and you and I talk about religion and kind of how it leads people down, a path and stuff like that, and what's interesting to me is that if you were to really look at the things that we were told to do, right? A lot of it is pretty good information, right? You don't take a guy who's still carving pictograms into stone tablets and tell him, hey, you have to make sure you cook the pig really good, because there's these because you'll get trichinosis, and he'll be like, trichowuffus, right? And so you got to explain, well, these little bugs get inside the pig and lay eggs, and it'll kill you. And he's like, well, I don't see any fucking eggs in here. Well, the eggs are so small you can see them. Right. You say, don't eat that. It's forbidden, right? So this is the law. You don't eat that. It's forbidden, and you make it a religion, right? So religion is our way of is science for the ignorant, right? It's our way of understanding the world in its current state when we were understanding the world back then, before we understood shit. But now we've moved past that. And so what we need to do is we need to grow up and say, okay, these rules don't apply anymore. These particular rules. Some of them still apply. Like killing somebody is probably still a bad idea, right? Fucking your neighbor's wife is probably a bad idea. Yeah, it's going to cause heartache and pain.
Teach the AI that shit.
Right. And so, we need to make sure we keep the things that make sense and leave the things that have ceased to make sense behind. When you tell your child when he's 7 years old, he doesn't need to be roaming around the neighborhood until 9:15 at night, right? You come back when it gets dark. But for an 18-year-old child, that doesn't make a whole lot of fucking sense. He's going to get pissed at you because he's 18 and he wants to be out past dark. And I think he's probably earned it by that time. Maybe he hasn't. Whatever. Different rules apply, right? So we've grown up a little bit. Yeah, we've grown up a little bit as a race, as human things, right?
Have we? I mean,
some of us have. It's not, not everybody grows at the same rate, right? Sometimes.
Look, and here's what's going to happen. We're going to talk about these things on this podcast.
Right.
And we're going to discuss it. We're going to break it down. We're going to think tank it, and, we're going to get fanatics on here. Right? I mean, at some point in the future, they're just going to lose their mind because you suggested religion is...
It needs to be updated a little bit.
Right.
We need to update a little bit.
And that's fine. That's cool. Matter of fact, I kind of look forward to reading them. But, there is a very, very strong foundation of humanity that are the least grown up.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
From a species standpoint.
Absolutely.
And a lot of these people have a lot of money, right? I mean, so this is...
a lot of these people have... Yeah,
this is going to be tougher than... now we're talking, I think I have a better chance of walking on the moon.
And maybe that's...
Than seeing our species grow up to a point where they would accept a new set of rules.
I think... See, it's such a case-by-case basis, right? There are parts of the world where people have known no different, right? If you grow up in a place like Indonesia, you grow up. I've been to a place. I was in a place called Surabaya, Indonesia, back in the late '90s, and holy cow, man! Like, we got in a van with a dude, and he drove us out into the middle of the jungle, and we came to this street in a clearing where it was probably 10 or 15 buildings on either side of the street, and then jungle, and then jungle. But then in this clearing, there's 15, 30, 40 buildings on this one street. And we pulled up, and dude went inside and came out with a bunch of beers, and we sat around and drank and talked to the locals. But it was a street in the middle of the jungle. They grew up and probably died there,
right? Not
far from there, right?
Right.
And that's all they ever knew. When you take someone like that, right, and you all of a sudden take them and just pick them up and move them to Detroit, they're not going to have a good time, man.
Right.
It's not going to end well for anybody. They're not going to adapt. You take a 35-year-old man and you move him to a different state, he's going to have a rough time of it.
Yeah.
Right? But if you take a 35-year-old man and you take him from Surabaya, Indonesia, and you drop him in Detroit, the shit's going to get fucked up, right? And then you take 10,000 guys from Surabaya, Indonesia, and then you drop them in Detroit. And what are they going to do? They're going to clump together into this 10,000 person clump, and they're going to fend off the outsiders. And that doesn't end well for anyone either.
Right.
So what do you do to educate people and to help them mature at a rate that is doable for a human being? Allow them to adapt slowly. How do you do that?
First, you got to convince them they need to change, or should,
or that there is even an option to change.
Right. And then you got to teach them. I mean, but they got to
want it, right?
They got to want to be taught.
And that's the thing. Do you think that the guy that you pick up out of Surabaya, Indonesia, and drop in Detroit is going to want to learn to be different? And then we're talking about forcibly removed, right? We're not talking about like he just up into, like he went to medical school and lifted himself out of this little town in the middle of the forest. No, this is not how this is going down in places like, Germany and France. And
so the other option is that they become convinced very quickly that they need to change due to intervention from some outside force or information, right? I mean, there's information on this planet.
That's right.
That will clarify a lot of what we think or believe is real.
Right.
Right? And we know that there are groups on this planet that will go to no end to make sure that stuff never sees the day of light. But that kind of discovery, that kind of information, that shock to the system, that will hopefully make it to the public one day, might open up a lot of eyes. You know what I mean? Yeah. That kind of thing. And now you understand maybe a little more, at least why people will go to no end to make sure that stuff gets destroyed before it's ever seen, right? I mean, we've heard about this.
Right.
We've heard about Vatican helicopters coming and confiscating or commandeering artifacts in
right.
order to, make sure that they get locked away or destroyed. Whether any of that's true or not, that's all,
Right. The stories are out there.
Right. So there is information on this planet that clarifies a lot, and I think.
I think that there's
that
information
kind of that or event, something like that happening. It takes one or two or three of those probably before, as a culture, as a society, as a species,
right,
that we can grow up. Right. Otherwise, you're going to have factions that have grown up. They exist now.
Right.
I mean,
absolutely. I do think that there are some of us who've decided that, look, man, going after other human beings for pretty much anything is pretty much counterproductive, right? You just kind of do your thing and help people along the way and try to, lift all the boats up, right? And there's definitely the people who just don't get that, right? Who don't get the fact that we've definitely reached a place where we're all going to have to really start to think about where we're going, what we're doing, where we're going to be next week, right? Because, we're at what feels like a really important crossroads, right? Where we're getting all of this technology and it's all kind of overtaking us, and that there are parts of the world, like, you go out to California and go out to one of the tech hubs, and that is, an quote unquote enlightened society, right? Where people treat each other with some modicum of respect, right? But then you have a place like freaking Iraq, which they're basically a post-apocalyptic civilization right now. The most of the Middle East is post-apocalyptic right now, and then you look at Africa, right? And I heard a statistic once, and who the fuck knows whether it's correct, but it sounds fucking good to me, right? There are more mobile phones in Africa than there are toilets.
Yeah.
I don't find that hard to believe,
Well, there are a lot of places to go in Africa.
Yeah, that's right. There's a lot of open space to take care of business. But so it's such a weird, disjointed kind of like thing that we have, the humanity, and some of us are really doing a freaking broadcasting to an audience from from a bunker in the Ozarks, right? And then you have dudes who are like sitting in Nigeria talking to a dude in Columbus, Ohio, trying to scam him out of 10 grand, right? Like, it's such a weird fucking place that we live in right now.
Yeah, it is a crossroads, and it's gonna open up even more. I mean, Zuckerberg's talking about these Wi-Fi planes.
Oh yeah, we're doing this again with the
yeah. Let's say he's able to pull that off, and doesn't cause a war over airspace, right, and all of that, but
I wonder how many will get shot down, dude.
That globalization will be. I think that's going to progress at the same rate as everything else. I mean, I think we're getting at least to that point where everyone's talking. They're not necessarily talking productively. A lot of times it sounds like racial slurs and yelling and things
absolutely,
like that.
But let's do that, though. Because, let's do it. Let's do it online, right? Let's do it over Twitter or on a podcast or yell at each other over the news station or whatever. Because I think that's healthy. I think we need to do that. We need to have this discussion. We need to have the discussions that we're having right now, even if it's just people fucking screaming at each other, not hearing anything. Because eventually, once we get through the temper tantrum, right, we'll be at the place where we can actually have a civil conversation about the things that we need to have a civil conversation about. Like, we've got culture problems as humanity, sure. Like as a species, we have culture problems. Right. There are cultures that are really just detrimental to our future existence, right? I mean, straight up, not good practices, not good to each other, you know, just bad ideas. There's bad ideas everywhere. I mean, in America, there's bad ideas, and in Canada, whatever, there's bad ideas, and we need to sort through these bad ideas first, right? And I think what's going to happen is when we've discussed these bad ideas in the past, we have a tendency to kill each other over these bad ideas, right? You know, a couple world wars where some dudes had just the wrong idea of how to go about shit, right? Sure. And so a lot of people died. I think this time, I think it's good that we're having this discussion over the internet and not over a trench or strapped to the back of a freaking nuke or whatever. As long as we keep it online and keep it a discussion, I don't even give a shit if the people are screaming at each other and people are getting, they're triggered and microaggression and whatever.
We're talking.
I don't give a shit. As long as you're not shooting at each other, that's really what it amounts to. Nobody's getting hurt. Maybe some feelings are getting hurt, but nobody's fucking dying, right? Because last time when we had an internal discussion with ourselves as a nation, we lost 850,000 people or thereabouts, and some feelings are still hurt over that shit. So better to do it this way this time.
No, I agree. I mean, what disappoints me in trying to stay on topic of the progression of the human species, right? Mm-hmm. and where we're at, and the probably I certainly know my lifetime is not even a blip,
right?
From a universal ember, time standpoint, right? We're a spark floating, but we seem to have had this couple, I don't know, I remember the LA riots,
oh yeah,
mm-hmm. and recently talking with a client, I'm not sure we've moved that much. I don't think we've moved that needle that much, right?
You mean from Rodney King days?
Just,
I think in some places we have, and I think in some places we've definitely kind of taken a step backwards.
I feel like, humanity is still at juvenile standpoint for a species. If we've, juvenile might be generous. I'm afraid we got to be hit a few more times with reality, like a big old species spanking.
God, I hope
a few more times, because I just don't feel like, or a mothership lowers.
Right. Yeah, I don't find that likely, man.
Above New York City next week, and makes it really, really clear that all of you, are fucking up.
Well,
you know what I mean? Because without that,
I know I would love for that to happen. Well, I don't know, man. It depends. You would obviously. Can I steal one of your cigarettes?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Obviously, I would love to imagine that benevolent race, right, coming out of the sky and dropping down and dropping knowledge on us, right?
Explaining where we've, hey, this is really what we meant.
Right, something.
10,000 years ago when we left here, and we gave you very specific
instructions. Yeah, and you guys fucked it all up.
This is what you did with it.
I would love for that to happen. I don't think it's very likely at all.
But in such a, I think that's my point. Without that,
mm-hmm.
which is highly unlikely. I don't think as a species we're even close. And you're an optimist. I know that.
Definitely an optimist about it.
I know you're an optimist. I just, there is going to become this, and you address this a little bit in your book. This this fear of technology is going to become a very strong force. It's going to be hopefully we can all get past, you know, there's the very real science as to why human beings are different colors, right? I mean, this is a science thing, right? This is such a, we know why.
It's a ridiculous notion. The idea of race is a ridiculous notion. It's not scientifically backed up. It's not a race problem. We don't have a race problem. We have a culture problem.
20 years from now,
part of our culture realizes that there's no such thing as race. It doesn't make sense. It's stupid. Okay? He's a different phenotype than I am. He looks different than me. I look different than you. You look different than me. We look a little bit alike because we came from the same general area. I think the problem is the culture. The culture of saying that it's not okay, right? That there's a difference. And I think by accentuating the differences and not accentuating the commonalities in addition to the differences, we need to celebrate some of the differences, but then we need to reconcile the other ones, right? Mm-hmm. I don't care that Muslims don't eat pork. It doesn't affect me at all.
Right.
More bacon for me. I just don't, you know.
Right.
But when your beliefs, whether you be a Jew or a Muslim or a Christian or any of those things that you want to self-identify as, when those things start to get in the way of other people's ability to exercise their rights, then it becomes a problem. And that's a cultural problem, right? And it has very little to do with race and has more to do with the ideas that go along with the culture that people have been brought up in, right? I know you've moved around. I've moved around. You grew up in the South to a certain extent, right? Like you were born in the South and you lived there for a while and I lived there for a while and you and I probably had very different experiences. I was a Yankee in the South, and so I had that experience, and you were born down there, so you had that kind of experience.
Yeah.
It's a cultural shift that needs to happen where we stop looking at, not necessarily stop looking at the differences, but stop accentuating them so much and find some commonality first before identifying your differences.
No.
Let's all realize that we're all on this fucking planet, man. We are on a rock spinning around a big flaming ball that could get hit by another rock at any moment and end everything.
Sure.
We're all in this together, regardless of what anyone thinks. We need to realize that we're all in this fucking together and just knock it the fuck off.
Yeah, I agree. You know, what's tough is the polarization, you know, and that's when you a lot of all right, here's really what it comes down to. You have one group of people trying to convince, and this is, you're saying, find your similarities before identifying your differences.
Right. Find a common ground first.
You know, it's entirely too logical to put into practice. So here's what ends up happening. You know, when I look at my own country, which is obviously where I've had the most experience, you know, those people in you know, yeah, you know, the South has always been the South. You know, there's the same way California is California and
yep.
Pennsylvania is Pennsylvania, right? I mean, but when I don't know how to communicate in a way that says, you know, you're wrong, you just need to grow up and join us, right? I mean, that's what it sounds like.
I know, right?
Right?
It sounds like...
That's what it sounds like.
It
and
does.
That doesn't go over well.
It doesn't.
And, you know, that's, you know, right there, it's just... there's
You know what it
it's
sounds
sort
like?
of this simple thing that is tremendously complex. That if we could get over that hump,
It sounds like arrogance, and that's the problem, right?
well, arrogance and certainly pride. I mean, if you could give one thing to the human race or take it away, right? One thing I would take away is pride, right? Because
Pride never helps, man. It never helps you.
It's really the cause of a lot of
It is
a lot of these issues, right? But while pride exists, you might as well be as proud as you can be.
Well,
and now we're clashing heads again. Oh shit, we almost got there, but
I think that pride gets mislabeled a lot as a different thing. I think it's okay to be proud of the things that you have done, or proud of other people and what they've done, and that's one thing. But I think that when people talk of, his pride wouldn't let him do it, that's not pride. That's just stubbornness. And I think we need to acknowledge that there's a big difference, right? Because we're getting to the point where our definitions are getting more and more narrow and more specific, right? One of the things that I love about humanity is we are naming machines, right? We identify, catalog, and examine.
Right.
It's just what we do as humans. You look at a baby and you look at when he first pops out, the first thing he's doing is he's wiggling his fingers, looking around for something to touch. We are learning categorization machines. So it's gotten a little out of control where we've gotten a little too specific. Okay. I am, I identify as a large winged dragonkin, right? I'm sorry, man. I can't go with you there, right? That's fine. If that's what's in your head, do it up. As long as it has nothing to do with me, right? If it impedes my ability to do something, then maybe you need to re-examine it, right? I think that we're going too far down the specificity road where I am specifically this thing. Why can't it be? And I had this discussion with my wife the other night. She was talking about, it's hard to put on them. It's hard to take off the mom hat. And I said, well, why does it have to be an or? Why can't it be an and? Right? And why can't we all be an and? Right? Why can't I be a human and a white cis male, which is like the lowest form of scum on the earth, right? Why can't I be an understanding person along with the and of all the other stuff?
Well, I mean, I think we can examine it for exactly what it is, and in a sense, like the science and research community, culturally, is okay with being wrong, right? If you're running experiments,
oh yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Your days of being right are few and far between.
Yeah, and they're numbered a lot of times.
But they're part of a very important process. Every single day prior to that you were wrong was still a good day, because it's one thing you don't have to try tomorrow, and we are going to get to our conclusion, our solution, whatever it may be.
Absolutely.
Culturally, the science and research community is in a much better place for progression, for the other side of that coin is hard set on a book that most of them don't even realize where it came from or how it was developed, right?
Right.
I mean, with zero room for movement.
Right. And see that, when we were talking about religion as the science of a man who doesn't understand, right?
But that's if you have a better chance of convincing a scientist or researcher something about religion than you do the other opposite way, and I think I've always thought, what really is the difference if 10,000 years ago we were left here.
It doesn't make any
right?
difference. It's completely
and we were programmed with a message in our DNA that one day if all of that whole storyline turns out to be true, what is the difference between that and what we perceive as religion,
chance, right?
I mean, where's the movement there? I mean, we still insist that God is a white dude floating on a cloud with a white beard down to about here.
And then that's our perception of it, right? And then, the Hindu religion has a different perception of what the creator looks like, and so on and so forth.
That is so many thousands of years, millions of bodies,
right?
I mean, blood, sweat, tears, literally all of it in buckets and buckets and buckets for anybody to stop right now.
Yeah.
It's just a forge forward, and it even becomes,
So here's the next
Is it more
question.
volatile now than it was 2,000 years ago? No, probably not. It's probably gotten better.
Oh, it has, absolutely. We live in, but if you really look at the numbers and you really go in and you dive down and you try to figure out, okay, are we living in a more violent time than, whatever? Pick a number, and the answer is probably going to be no.
Not,
yeah,
right?
I mean, the difference is we have nothing has changed. Our information is better, right? And I think that I butchered that quote from somebody, I'm sure. We've gotten to the place where we know too much about what's going on, right? It's causing people distress.
True.
Facebook causes depression, and 24-hour news cycle causes anxiety. So, whatever. But to round back around to where we started from. And then we'll hit this,
time flies,
and then we'll wrap it up with this thought. So, what do you think is going to happen when? Say, let's make one assumption. Let's make an assumption that if you're alive right now, and you're going to live for the next 30 years, that you'll be alive for the next 1,000. What impact do you think that will have on the very religious when they have the actual choice between going and meeting their creator, whichever flavor of creator that is, or to stay and gut it out and live here? And when you actually have that meaningful choice between actually saying, no, you know what? I'm going to go see my place name here of deity.
Sounds like the rapture to me. Just a different way of looking at it.
I guess, right? The faithful stay faithful and they pass away. And the unfaithful infidels like you and I, who
we stay in hell,
quite ready for to see whether that's real or not, we stick around. Mm-hmm. And then what? They weed themselves out. I mean, that... Yeah. I mean, is that what happens? Like, do you think that anyone who is truly dedicated to their faith is going to rewind the clock?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to think about and speculate on. I mean, it really is. It's I immediately think about sort of these geopolitical impacts of being the first nation to figure out the fountain of youth, and because we're still in that area, right? So, are these advancements, are they what eventually does trigger sort of this, I don't know, I imagine a final land grab in which we no longer have more than 3 nations that have large chunks of earth and water on this planet.
Right.
I just know humans so well.
Well, I mean, think about it though. Like the people who truly believe that there's something better on the other side, we'll go that route. And it'll be interesting to see whether the ignorance stays at that point. Maybe you and I need to just gut it out for the next 30 years, and then maybe in 50, if we make it that far, we'll have a bit different outlook.
I think it's human nature to always be, I think I don't know that I don't know that racism in our lifetime ever truly is gone, right? I think we stay in the same.
What if our lifetime is a lot longer than we think?
I still think it won't be gone.
Maybe that's the event. Maybe that's the event that makes us realize that, hey, look, we're going to be around each other for a little bit longer. Maybe we should try to be a little bit nicer.
No, I mean, I think in the same way that when I think back to the village and the jungle,
mm-hmm.
And it ran through my head, and I sort of also inside my head chuckled. I might have even did it, visibly. What happens in the village and the jungle stays in the village and the jungle, right?
Right.
But what effect that has on their neurology, the way they think, it's not even something I think you and I could probably even truly understand, because we live in this information world. It could be right over the tree line is a genocide, and if it's far enough on the other side of that tree line, they would never even know, so they won't have such sad feelings about it. They would have never heard about it.
Right.
These things are so, this information, I think, just we have to learn how to process this individually in a better way,
right?
And how to utilize this tool. I mean, it goes back to the hammer. We can build a house, or we can cave in a skull with it,
right?
And I think we got to get to the point where we're building houses with it and not caving in skulls.
Absolutely, and I 100% agree with you. I'm just curious to see, like you were talking about a catalyst, an event to push us. I think that we're getting real close to it. I think that, I think if there's any doubt, we're in the crisis right now, right? We're in the cycle of crisis where things are going south, and things are going to go south for a while, and probably a good decade. We got probably a good more decade of this nonsense to happen. And then I think once we get through this crisis, if we get through this crisis, and I'm pretty sure we're going to get through this one, things will get really good for a while, and then who knows? I think if the right guy turns the right key and the right lock in some lab somewhere, I think a lot of shit's going to just burst open all at once, and it'll be interesting to see. But I'm optimistic about it, man. I'm hoping that it'll go the right way.
Well, we'll still find a way to fight over it, won't we?
Yep, we will.
So I think you're right. You were right a while ago. Yeah, it's a cultural issue, and it's really slow changing a massive.
It's like turning a battleship.
Yeah. So.
Right.
I think an event could help or hinder. I'm not sure, but right now, to your point, I hope we don't have a decade of it, but I certainly wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah.
As far as a country, as far as America is concerned, I feel like things are going south right now, but I'm not sure I can say it for the rest of the globe. I think it's going to take Americans to all of a sudden, all right, you got the nicest house on the block, and you get all fat and comfy, and then one day you walk outside and realize your house is now the pretty humble one on the block, and maybe you take a little better care of your house at that point. I think from a country standpoint, we're headed that way. I think we have to see other nations. Okay, we've spent how much of this information age as a leader of this, or perceived to be, right? And now all of a sudden, we're realizing we've got to grow up. And I think that has to happen. And unfortunately, that's not a pretty sight. I don't think.
No, I don't think it is either. But I think it's what we're going through right now, politically. We're gonna have to get back to that probably next week. We'll talk. I think next week what we'll do is we'll sit and we'll just we'll try to unpack this whole nonsense that's going on in DC. What do you think?
I say let's do it.
All right, man.
All right, Locke and Noon out.